Everybody, thanks for checking out the Chris Gethard Show podcast. It's really cool that you're checking this out.
We're about to do, I think, the dumbest show we've done in years.
His life would be trashed! And you better believe I'm trashed.
We are scrappy trash people.
What's the point of this show? I just turned it on.
We've always been with this show.
We've always been trash people. We will always be trash people.
It's true.
This doesn't feel real.
Starting soon is now.
Hello, everyone. Live from my grandmother's basement, this is Gatsby the Cat. And we're the trash people. I'm Emily Pineapple.
And I'm Forrest, keeper of the Canon.
And we talk about things related to and in the world of Planet Scum and its community.
Yeah.
And we're incredibly excited today.
Oh, congratulations, Stephen Premmel.
Fuck yes!
Woo! We got ours earlier, too.
Fuck yes! Hello, 1BBR.
Hello, 1BBR.
Do you have a one bedroom? I don't know. I see that and I'm like, one bedroom.
I thought BB-8.
Oh. Well, today we're incredibly excited because we have someone back. Thank you, Stephen Premmel. Can I tell you that when my mother saw this, she screamed with a scream that I would previously only think someone would scream if they saw their child with like a hate symbol tattooed on them.
This is just cool hair.
Yeah, this is just cool hair. This literally hurts no humans. But you know, Forrest size do be poppin'. But you know what else is poppin'? Our guest returning to us.
Yes.
This is a person we had on before, and we just had to have them back to talk about that which they study. Because that which they study, not only are they an incredible artist.
Not only.
But they are a scholar. And a scholar of what, Forrest? What are they a scholar of?
Video game theory.
Video game theory. Welcome back to the show, Horde Jedi.
Hi, you guys. Oh my God, what a nice introduction. And also, your hair is fantastic. I want to echo all the claims from the chat.
Fuck yes. Yeah, no, I'm just going to choose to not believe that every other human I've interacted with, especially the ones my age, are lying to me.
No.
Everyone look out for that when your parents don't like your choices.
Oh. I think it's
fucking
fabulous.
hilarious. I love it. I am having so much fun, but I'm so excited, Horde Jedi, because we just sort of touched on this in our last conversation. Towards the end, you're like, well...
That's me.
Policing and rule creation that spontaneously arises. I can't even maintain my professor voice. I'm so excited about this. How it just naturally arises in MMOs, big World of Warcraft. I have not played these games. I have seen none of this. I know not, and I am so
That's
fascinated.
okay. That's
Horde
okay.
Jedi. Let's start. Tell us a sort of a summary, what was your topic of study and what did it entail?
Sure. So when I was an undergraduate, I was actually an English major, and one of the possible electives we could choose was video games, which seemed really great and fun. I liked video games. I'd like to get credit for playing video games, and it was the first time I'd ever seen critical theory and literary theory being applied to games like they would be applied to any other cultural medium like film or books, plays, things like that. And it was just really, really fun. And what's exciting about it is it's a relatively new field. So there's still a lot of room for exploration and creativity and being wrong and learning from other people. It's really nice. Yeah.
That is incredible. So tell me how does literary theory, how do these theories, how are they applied to video games? And I know you more specifically focused on community cohesion and the sociology, the anthropology of humans in worlds where they can just kill shit and no one cares. But do they care?
Sometimes, but sometimes they don't. I played World of Warcraft a lot. And so when you spend enough time in a place, you start developing emotional relationships with the environment. Like I have very acute feelings of homesickness for certain parts of Azeroth, the planet that you play in World of Warcraft. And it's also like it's ripe for study because there's thousands of people playing. You have at this point over a decade worth of data. It's just it's sort of the perfect virtual playground for finding answers to basically whatever question you could have about a video game. So to answer your question about applying literary theory, like, there's all kinds of ways to approach studying video games. You can look at it like as a cultural artifact, like a book. You can read it through like a feminist lens. You can look at it like from a ludological perspective, where you are looking at the rules and the way the games are actually programmed, the way the rules interact with each other. You can look at it from an artistic perspective, from an environmental design perspective, from a civics perspective, right? Like how do you design virtual neighborhoods? How do you account for virtual bodies and virtual spaces in a way that feels good? And how do those rules differ from like how you would do that in real life in Meat Space? You know what I mean? Yeah.
I very much resonate with the homesickness that you brought up because I didn't play WoW as much, but I played a lot of Star Wars Galaxies, and I'm very nostalgic for specific parts of Tatooine and Naboo, where I spent most of my time. And that was such an open thing where there was so little top down on the economy in the game and all sorts of things that it was also an interesting space to see all these sort of social organizations rise up.
Absolutely. And honestly, like in talking to people who play different MMOs, the intensity of the relationship that people that played Star Wars Galaxies have with Star Wars Galaxies is unlike anything else, even World of Warcraft, in part because it ended. Like it's really heartbreaking that you can find a virtual home and then because it's owned by a business, when it's no longer profitable or for whatever reason, it can just disappear. And that's, and there's actually a lot of studies on like how do those communities kind of recover from that. A lot of them will sort of recreate the virtual world in private servers so that they can still hang out. Sometimes they're sued for that, to the tune of like $80 million. So there's, it kind of hit or miss, but it's really heartbreaking when things go away. I know Galaxies was a big loss for a lot of people.
That is astounding to me, that fact of that many dollars. But tell me, so did you have a particular thesis or paper or area of question?
Yeah. So I was really interested in how people's behavior is like, I'm interested in like, okay, so a game is kind of, you think of it like a nesting set of rules, right? There's like the rules of the terms of service that you have to agree to. There's the rules like programmatically, like what is actually possible within the game. There's also like the rules of, social rules, social norms and mores. And these things all intersect. I was curious about how they're enforced. And I'm curious about this idea about there being a right and wrong way to play. A lot of games, including World of Warcraft, like they have not just limits on things that you feel, intuitively they'd want to limit, like cheating. But again, cheating is a huge umbrella that we can talk about. Harassment, hacking, things like that. But also, sort of like there's this idea, there's an old trope in World of Warcraft called a creative use of game mechanics, which is the idea that like whether behaving in a way that the program doesn't expect, whether it's considered a violation of the rules or a creative use of game mechanics, is due to almost like a mystery. It depends on who's on shift enforcing that day. A lot of different factors going into it, cultural factors and stuff like that. And the fact that it's also mysterious and weird really interested me, especially because I was banned a lot in World of Warcraft.
What were you banned for? Tell me the dirty details.
Well, when I was a teen, I was banned for like foul language. But, you can also be banned in World of Warcraft, and this is the part that interests me the most, for what I would call exploration and what some developers would call yeah, things like that we'll call exploits, basically. Being out of bounds.
This picture is you, correct?
Yes, that's me.
At the edge of the world.
Pretty much.
Who goes into a place where you can go to the edge of the world and does not go to the edge of the world? This is my big question. Do you agree with me? Tell me about this.
I completely agree with you. So because, the way that this world is implemented, like narratively, it's all one big planet, right? So there shouldn't be an edge of the world. Azeroth is sphere. There's no flat earthers, I think, in WoW, maybe, I don't know. But because different zones are each on their own server, there's all kinds of edges of the world, right? Because as soon as you transition from one zone to another, in virtual space, like everything starts changing. So in this one, it's a very cordoned off instance of this one specific area in the game that you're only supposed to be in for a certain part of the story. And so it's kind of like a cloned copy of a little bit of a country kept by itself. And there are certain ways that you can, without any kind of, third-party software or anything that, that's obviously considered that, colloquially could be called a hack, you can just get here. With a creative use of game mechanics. And, once you're here, you can take pretty screenshots and stuff like that. But what I love about World of Warcraft is there are, years of essentially folklore about, okay, what happens when you get here? Like, can the developer tell? Because the idea is like, if you're caught here, you can be punished, but how do they catch you? Like, are there booby traps? Are there alarms? Does someone have to report you? Do they not really care? They just say you can't go there to discourage it. And a lot of that is kind of still up for debate to this day.
Oh my gosh. So you got banned for this kind of exploration. Am I correct?
Yes.
Tell me the coolest thing that you saw that you got banned for.
Well, I was only banned for exploration once. There was, and I think I may have sent a screenshot, there was a place called Mount Hyjal that is, it's a location from an earlier game in the Warcraft franchise, Warcraft 3. And they started implementing in the game, but didn't finish it. And so you weren't supposed to go there until it was done, basically. There you go. And so, but if you are able to, not manipulate, jump in certain ways, make use of certain abilities that randomly position your character in a certain path, things like that, to eventually work your way up there. There's this construction equipment that, is obviously like an inside joke, like we're not done with this zone yet. But what I think is so interesting is that why put that there if no one's allowed to see it? Right? And in fact, if you can be punished for seeing it, it's very bizarre.
Wow.
That feels...
I too have a good feeling about those gates, Eric Germ. That's the kind of thing that, like, is that not a big open door screaming to you, come look at this?
Well, I know, especially, people talk, and it's a community of people who share stories, and it's kind of like a rite of passage, like you can imagine, like when you're kids, there's an old haunted abandoned house down the street, like being brave enough to go in there and come back with a story is an important, cultural communication. And, it's weird because like there are a lot of parallels like with real world policing and real world ideas about policing and surveillance. So a lot of how this functions in the game is kind of like this idea of a panopticon, where a panopticon there was a philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, who designed what he believed was like a really efficient, almost like a aspirational prison system. Yeah. So he thought it was so great, and he thought it was so humanitarian. The idea that instead of having all these guards to monitor everyone in all of their cells, you would have this sphere where every cell cylinder, I guess, is here facing forward, and then one guard in the center, and the people in the cells never know which cell the guard is looking at. So the idea is that you police yourself because you always have the possibility of being watched, even though you can't see any signs of it. So Blizzard will employ things like there's a debuff, which is like a little a little icon that appears on your screen that shows that you're being hurt in some way. There you go.
Or you can just put up a picture of the cafe I used to work at.
Yeah.
That had cameras all the time. And
Yeah.
so I was an excellent worker.
The Panopticon was so central with my film degree too.
Oh, really?
I read the Panopticon, like essays about the Panopticon and all that.
It's fascinating.
Right? Because I was very much in the new media space, and so it was this very similar thing where it replicated the Panopticon with sort of some of the YouTube ID content tracking and stuff, where you're always being watched. The threat that the YouTube bot will take down your channel if you do something is the threat enough, even though you know it won't happen every time.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, and in things like World of Warcraft, I'm not as familiar with the YouTube ID, but like in World of Warcraft, you don't even quite know the terms of, you don't know how to evade being caught because you don't know how they catch you. Like you don't know what their current algorithm is, what data they're currently looking at, especially when it's live and they can, you know, hotfix it within a second to change how it works. So you can see how it might be more efficient for them to sort of scare you into self-policing rather than employ a bunch of, you know, cops, basically. Although it's interesting, there's a role-playing server. So when you make a character, you can decide, do I want it to be just like a straightforward interacting with other people and a story? Do I want to make it a PvP character where I can fight other players? Or do I want to make it a role-playing character where I can do all that stuff, but also I have to pretend to be in character all the time, so does everybody else. And there was one role-playing server called Feathermoon that had a specific tavern that was very popular for basically hookups. And so people would come from all other servers to sort of meet there and just have cyber sex with other elves and dwarves and things like that.
Yes!
Yeah. But that is illegal in World of Warcraft. And so it became such a problem that they stationed permanently, well, I think they're gone now, but for a while, you know, a GM, a game master they were called, was there and invisible basically 24 hours a day to basically ban people that are trying to have sex there in that town. So it's just like very bizarre things. And as you can see, like based on real world social mores about like, well, who cares if people are going there to have sex with an orc? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But they have to, you know, I don't know.
I love the extra, I find it so fascinating how you get this sort of moralistic element that crops up around the sort of social mores that start in a game but are completely outside of the mechanics. Like there was a Star Wars game, Jedi Outcast, where something that cropped up in the rules of the community around it was you had to bow. You had to do the bow emote before you fought someone. And if you didn't, it was before you fought another player, you each had to bow in multiplayer to each other. And if you didn't, it was this huge violation of like, you're so rude, how dare you? Or if you attacked someone in the midst of a duel, that was rude. If you used too many force powers rather than using your lightsaber, that was cheap and cheating. And like, why are you doing that? Why are you just like force choking me? That's not how this is supposed to work. Even though there are built-in countermeasures to force choke that make it so you can't do it. The real countermeasure wasn't absorb where you just are immune to it. It was the social norms of if you're on a modded server, you might get kicked for doing that.
Is so interesting. And can you tell me, like, were servers persistent? Like you had communities and like people. Okay.
You could get an IP ban.
Okay.
If you did it enough, and like you could get around it, but if you got around it and came back under the same name, you could easily get. Yeah, and actually, Purple Hat makes this joke. It's a combat method of a more civilized age. But that was, I think that notion from the movies was the root of so much of this. Like, tons of the servers deactivated guns, so you couldn't have guns. It was lightsabers and force powers only. And this wasn't even an MMO. This was like a moderately popular Star Wars first-person shooter.
Yeah.
And it still developed all this. And then people coded mods and everything to make the social rules actually enforceable things. where like there became
That's just real laws.
Yeah, it just
there
evolves
became-
into tyranny then. Like
there became game mechanics that would make it so you locked out when you did the duels, you automatically bowed. And
oh, but then that takes
you
all the
couldn't-
meaning of the respect if you're
Exactly.
not choosing to. There,
Yeah, and
Wow.
you couldn't damage people who were in a locked-in duel either.
Interesting.
So it was taking this honor system, and making it totally meaningless and useless.
That's interesting. You know, in World of Warcraft, there was a similar thing, and they, you know, because it's such an old game, they.
That's my kind of shit. I'm like, what are the rules of these games? And as a human who has played very few games in her life, every single time I have, the first thing I do is be like, all right, like, what are my boundaries in that if I murder every single the thing around me, is that a problem?
Sure.
What, like, and of course I was told, my partner at the time was very annoyed with me being like, Emily, we're in, Fallout New Vegas, stop killing the civilians. They will try and kill you back. Like, and I'm like, wait, it's a game. Like, why are you giving me rules, man? And of course, they came and tried to kill me. And I did not get very far. But
Jedi Outcast, it then became an arms race because hackers began spoofing their IPs and wall hacking and all of that and aimbotting and then just taking advantage of everything they could.
That's really interesting. What you were talking about, how the fact that it's like influenced by the fiction of the world is interesting. It was the same in World of Warcraft where like there was this idea. So in World of Warcraft, there are two opposing factions, the Alliance and the Horde. And you would hear people generalize certain behaviors as being specific to the Horde. Or to the Alliance, but of course they were the same behavior. So it often was like, oh, the Horde is always griefing us. And then if you played Horde, it'd be like, the Alliance is always griefing us. But they would reframe it narratively, like within the characteristics of the different factions and belief systems and traits of all these different species and stuff like that, as if it's real and we're not just all the same people playing the same game. But WoW tries to limit that by, and there's another bannable offense, is communicating across enemy lines.
Right.
So when you speak, your text is scrambled if someone doesn't understand your language. And that's also, so that's broken down. Well, it is cool in terms of like immersion and world building, but then if you find a way around it, like get someone to communicate a message for you or create a character on the opposite faction to talk, you can be banned for that. And like the idea is to prevent harassment and griefing and stuff like that. But it ends up sort of mirroring these very kind of hostile real world xenophobic attitudes. Do you know what I mean? Especially when the community is like using very xenophobic language to describe the other people that they're playing with. And this is, I think at its worst with the way that people talk about the idea of gold farming, which is very heavily policed. Emily, gold farming is basically this idea that if you don't want to spend a lot of time playing a game, but you want to progress and have cool gear or gold money to spend, you can pay someone real life money to do all of that for you. You just basically outsource your playing to somebody else. Which is against the terms of service, but I
can understand why, but I'm also like,
I agree with you, and the way that players talk about it was incredibly fucking racist. So these the assumption was always that gold farmers were Chinese, and so there was all kinds of anti-Chinese, awful language. It was, memeified to where it was in like fan music videos, and there's all kinds of awful things. And the way that players, described it kind of reminds you of a lot of real life racism where they frame it as like an economic anxiety. Like, I work really hard for my gold. It's not fair. And then they bring in like that these people from this other country are coming in and taking what's rightfully mine.
But actually the problem is the capitalism that exists in the real world that gives some people unfairly the capital to purchase things so that they can then perpetuate that in a game. Tell me, how is this? So this is, I'm so sorry.
The way that sort of metastasized in the real world is Steve Bannon.
I was gonna say that's what's so wild. This is how Steve Bannon figured out how to weaponize it in real life.
Yeah,
100%.
Was all from the gold farming and WoW. That was where he learned that specifically.
How he
the Trump stuff
implemented this racism for political gains.
Yes, and specifically learning how to weaponize young cis white guys with disposable income, basically. It's very chilling. It's very chilling. Yeah, and of course, and a lot of WoW players, of course, are complicit in this, and it's, a lot of the punishments, like the worst punishments, you would think they would be reserved for things like harassment or racist behavior, racist rhetoric, things like that. When, in my experience, just from sort of interviewing people and cataloging it, it's really the economic violations are the ones that are treated the most seriously, which is makes a lot of sense.
Exactly like here, but that is why I started laughing.
That reminds me of Galaxies also, because one of the things that I know so the way Galaxies worked for people who didn't play it was incredibly hard to be a Jedi. It was basically a 1 in a million chance. You had to then do all these certain steps to even get the possibility of becoming a Jedi. Yeah, random steps you didn't know. Eventually they were steps you knew, but it was basically still gambling. And people started then buying and selling Jedi characters on eBay.
Oh, sure.
And then those characters would get banned if they ever found out. But also, on the other hand, one thing you saw is people who got a little bit too into pretending to be Imperials.
Oh no! Oh no!
And we're like, I'm not being racist. I'm just being an Imperial. And it's like, well, but you are being racist while pretending to be an Imperial. Yeah,
Imperials aren't real, but the things you're saying are coming out of a real mouth or a real keyboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the ways you were informing it it was just interesting how much griefing even didn't always get punished. It was, if you threatened the economy, which in Galaxies especially was a problem because it was in no way centralized. It was entirely player run. All the prices were player set.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
Free market?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
The same way we have a free market.
I know. Well, and WoW, so they punished buying gold for a long time. And then I guess they would make all these promises like, we will never sell items, we will never sell gold. But Blizzard has changed a lot of hands, like different companies have bought them, there's regime changes, stuff like that. They now sell gold to players. Yeah. And so this idea is like, and they're framing it like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. It's like, is this an ethical problem for you or not? Like, it's like, oh, well, if we can monetize it, now all of our moral quandaries about it have evaporated.
Oh my God.
And they definitely use the safety argument too, where it's like, well, at least this way, you'll get the gold.
Yes, 100%. And then the way people talk about too, like there's a lot of real life language, like so the idea is like, if you like finish a certain high-end dungeon, you can get a certain piece of gear that you can only get there. So it's kind of a status symbol that you can show off. And these kind of items were called epics. It's a certain ranking of the rarity of the item. And so Blizzard over time was realizing like not everybody has 50 hours a week to spend playing World of Warcraft. People want to see the content and not have to do that. And so they started developing like easier tiers of the same dungeons. And you could get sort of like less powerful versions of those items, which the community then started calling welfare epics. And all of the same awful rhetoric of like, they didn't earn that. And like, I work hard for my epics and all of this stuff like that. And with no irony at all, and when you interview players about this, like even bringing that connection to them, they deny that it exists. They just say that it's a useful term to describe, the phenomenon as they interpret it. And it's so, I would say bizarre, but it makes perfect sense, right? Like you bring yourself to this virtual world, and even if it's populated by elves and orcs, like you bring human beings to it, and it becomes a mirror of human society.
Speaking of human beings, well, first we have one question.
Mm.
I do not know what this mythic quest is, or white supremacy. Is that a thing? What do you think of the
let me look in the
episode
comments.
of Mythic Quest?
Oh,
that dealt with is that a thing?
It's a TV show.
Yeah, I actually haven't watched Mythic Quest. But thank you for bringing it to my attention. I'd love to check that episode out. Do you think it does a good job, Stephen?
It's a video. And for people who don't know, it's a TV show on Apple Plus set at a company that runs a WoW-esque MMO.
Is it fiction or is it like a documentary?
It's fiction.
Oh, cool. That's really interesting. Yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'd love to check that out because it's interesting. It's very telling the stories we tell ourselves about these phenomenon. So that's really cool. Thank you.
Speaking again of people that are bringing themselves to these worlds, you mentioned that there are modus of control. There are modes of control that are entirely socially enforced within these games.
Yes.
Tell me about this, and I want to show some of those like pictures that blew my freaking mind.
Sure. So a lot of how this is pretty common in policing behavior in MMOs, where you have to kind of rely on players to basically report each other's negative behavior as they perceive it, because you can't be everywhere at once. This is actually lovely. I would say this is actually a positive example in World of Warcraft. But so for this, when WoW first came out a long time ago, 2005, 2006, so many more people played it than they anticipated, that there weren't enough enemies, mobs for people to kill. And so they, without any kind of direction, this is their first introduction to this virtual world, they willingly lined up and took turns killing that until they were able to leave this beginning area and spread out into the world and kind of make their own way. But like, it was this very communal experience. Obviously, there were still some people that would grief and run and cut in line and stuff like that. But the tone was very clear. Like, if you log in and you see this line of people, you get in line. And but this screenshot is actually, so years later, over a decade later, Blizzard brought back what they called their classic server. So it's the old version of the game as it originally launched, without any of the updates they've been putting out. And so people that even weren't necessarily there for when this happened at the game's beginning had heard these stories. And once again, there were more people than enemies, and people once again fell in line and sort of reenacted that. And whether, how much of that has to do with it's the same sort of altruistic behavior, everyone's excited to be there, that spurred it the first time, or if it was based on that kind of folklore of like, this is what they did, our ancestors did, and this is what we'll do. But yeah, that's a really nice example, I think. They're not all nice.
Speaking of one that's not nice, what is this?
What is this?
Oh my God. So this is one of my favorite things about World of Warcraft. This is Horde Buddy Breaking Land Stronghold. Oh, well, I do have to say, for all my talk about wanting to be a good citizen of Azeroth, I am Horde, and my favorite thing to do is to invade Alliance capitals and only kill NPCs. But yeah. So this is a place on what's called GM Island. So remember earlier I was showing you that sort of the construction signs. It's like there's stuff in the game that's put there for purposes other than players seeing it. Like, it's an unfinished area. It's a testing zone. There's a lot of places you can go where they wrote in the ground in dirt, like boss here, things like that, like for notes for each other, not meant to be seen by players. But there was a place called GM Island, which is where the game masters, like the in-game customer service representatives / punitive figures, if they needed to be somewhere in game, they would spawn here. And it was possible to get there through a number of sort of like, you had to drink water walking potions, you had to inoculate yourself against damage for a certain amount of time, you had to be able to move really quickly, very suddenly, and then stop very suddenly. Like, there's all kinds of, purple hat, exactly. They brought back a lot of that stuff when they brought back that original form in the game. And there's some new stuff too, which is really interesting. But I don't know if GM Island is in WoW Classic now. I'm actually trying to figure that out. Please don't tell them. But so anyway, as part of GM Island, they had this interrogation room that, as you can see, it's creepy as fuck. Like, these are textures that don't appear anywhere else in the game. If you've played World of Warcraft, you know, like, this is not the aesthetic. It's a very lush, beautiful fantasy setting. This is stark and frightening. The sky works differently here. It's very bizarre. And in the early days of WoW, if somebody had time, a GM would, don't. Don't. Impossible. A GM would actually physically teleport you here for interrogation rather than just talking to you through messages. And you can see how maybe it's something you implement for fun to create kind of verisimilitude. Like, it could also be seen as an intimidation tactic. You know, this is a very intimidating place. Not everybody was brought here. They stopped doing it because players were fascinated by the space and kept trying to access it, as you can imagine. But what's really interesting about this screenshot is a lot of people have private World of Warcraft servers, which are illegal. And so they're sort of, there's a weird ecosystem there where Blizzard tolerates them to a certain degree unless they start profiting, in which case you're sued and things like that, which is its own thing. But so basically, this is a private server. So players recreated this experience of accessing this interrogation chamber, basically teleporting players in and punishing them in this context, like fully embracing and reliving their sort of fantasies of punishing other players in this very theatrical way. And in this case, they're speaking through, I don't know if you can see, there's a rat on the floor. It is, that is a player, or one of the people who run the server right there. Exactly. Basically embodying the rat and telling them they're going to be banned, which is, as far as I know, not something that happened in actual interrogation things. But I have found on multiple private servers there is a rat there. So, which I can't quite explain. I don't know if the rat was there before, but the rat certainly never spoke. But this is like a new level of theatricality of like, wouldn't it be creepy if I was a rat when I was punishing this guy? Yeah, embody the rat. Yeah, exactly. But it's a bizarre choice. That interests me because you could have a server without rules. You're breaking rules. Why enforce certain ones? And you can see this guy's getting banned for purchasing gold. This is a private server. What does it matter if somebody's purchasing gold, Right. But they want to recreate or feel compelled to recreate a lot of the same norms and mores for the more authentic experience,
Oh, thank you, Jess Feds in Montgomery.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.
This is fascinating. So why do you think people engage in this behavior? What have you found through your research as to impetus? The research says nothing. That was the laugh of an academic who's like, you tell me.
Well, it's funny. So I'm not a sociologist, right? My background is in literature. So a lot of what I do is sort of like, I do like close reading of like the virtual environment. I do close reading of the forum posts surrounding these things. Like I look at text and how people talk and write and think about these things. I'd like at the end of my thesis, I'm still working on my thesis. I'd like at the end to be able to answer that. But I think it's honestly just probably the same thing that makes us want to follow rules or break rules in real life. You know what I mean? And I can see, I want to be careful what I say, right? Because I'm still, but like, I can imagine that after playing this game for a long time and being policed, when you are creating your own version of it, rather than it's interesting that rather than imagining like a more, at least a different, if not more ethical and transparent justice or rule system, to then assume the role of the person having power over other people can be kind of an intoxicating temptation. So I think some people give into. Also, it's hard to imagine punitive systems outside of what we have internalized growing up, right? Because it's how our society functions. We think, well, we have prisons because that's what you do, And so it's just, I think it's the same thing there, where sometimes it's a power fantasy. They want to be able to control other people. Sometimes it's just their best idea of how to run a server. Other times it's just like an appeal to authenticity. Like, well, this interrogation chamber is here, we should use it, But yeah, so I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Do you feel like there is this something that has come up in your study, or do you have any thoughts about the relationship between this being ultimately a fictional world and the level of physical safety you just have when you're in a fictional world versus in the real world, we have to choose, being dragged to an interrogation chamber in a game could be kind of fun, could be kind of exciting. It's like, haha, I got caught. But in real life, it's entirely different.
That's absolutely right. Like this is a game. It's a game. It's for fun. And certainly, it's useful to look at the norms and practices being enacted here to gain insight about the real stakes, higher stakes versions of it in real life. But you're right in that play is an inextricable part of this. Like it's not a life simulation. It's a fantasy game, And so there are a lot of there's a book I can recommend. I'll have to look up the title, but basically like this pitfall that a lot of people that study games fall into, which is discounting the aspect of play in it. A lot of an early study in World of Warcraft was actually an epidemiology study. There was a giant dead dragon, Forrest knows what I mean, named Hakar. And when you fought him, he would give you a blood disease that would, when it exploded, it would spread to the people that were near you. Well, so a player figured out that if you were a hunter and you had basically a beast companion, they could get it. And then when you left the dungeon, they brought the disease with them, and they would go to a city, and the whole city, people of all new players, level 1 through whatever, would get and spread this disease. And people, they die and then run back to their body to respawn and then get it again. And because it could not be controlled. And so there was a very famous piece done analyzing the behavior of the player population in that, and theorizing that it could be used as a, there you go. Look at all those skeletons in the ground. Those are basically players that have died and logged out or left their body. Yeah. Wow. And so it's basically used as a model for how people would behave in a real life pandemic. But yeah, I know. And actually, I'd be curious to see if that's being revisited now. Yes. Yeah. But it's obviously not a one-to-one, right? So you have to be very careful in how you look at that. Like, it can give you some insight, but it certainly isn't going to, it's not a replacement for this. But they did claim in the paper that there were a certain percentage of the population was altruistic, tried to help and warn other people and usher low-level players out of the city so they wouldn't get it. Other parts were just sort of chaos agents and tried to infect as many people as possible. Yeah. Some people just got angry and blamed the developers and refused to do anything about it. And this is sounding very familiar, So it was interesting, but I can't speak to, as I'm not an epidemiologist, how accurate it is.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that is absolutely fascinating. Are there other things that people have tried to look at games to model as a reflection of human behavior that either did or did not take into account that it is ultimately fictional and therefore humans are going to act differently? I would not go out and try and kill the first people that I saw in a new town. Right. But in a video game,
you're exactly right. It really, especially because in a fictional world, a lot of people have different. A lot of the people that are doing that don't think that they're being mean. They think that it's fun and funny. I'll have to reread it, I'm sure. Actually, what's interesting is years later. So Blizzard basically fixed this by making it so your pet as a hunter couldn't get it, and that when you changed zones, or I think your pet could still get it. When you changed zones, the disease disappeared from you. You were cured from it, so you couldn't bring it anywhere. But then years later, they had a new expansion that was sort of undead themed. And so they brought it back intentionally, like for fun, this idea that you would spread a zombie plague and it functioned the same way. A lot of people loved it and thought it was fun, and even thought that the whole, dying thing was fun because like it was just part of this limited time event game. Other people were furious, and like stopped playing and threatened to like stop, subscribing to the game. So, it's a big world with thousands of people, it means different things to different people. And we have to be careful about assuming that because you are a chaos agent in Azeroth means that you are a chaos agent in real life. Obviously, that's not true. Yeah. But I will also say there was a leaked memo from the Department of something. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Yeah. But like an investigative body for the United States talking about using people's behavior in video games as a way to sort of prevent real world terrorism, as if there are certain psychological profiles and behaviors in virtual worlds that you would mark somebody as someone to watch out for and investigate. So that's why part of this is like, on the one hand, the stuff that happens in virtual worlds doesn't correlate, but on the other hand, like people are acting like it does. And
what qualities they would look for, like, because there's like harassment, like when you get into an online game, are you being a racist, like that I can see as being like, oh, obviously this racist ass human is probably going to be racist.
To be honest, it's been a long time since I've read it. I don't remember the specifics. I do know that there is also an issue of like, how do they get that information? Do they need the developer to report player behavior to I know, right?
I
know. Like,
so they should be watching that from evil capitalists, honestly.
Well, and it's like, we there's a lot of to be concerned about surveillance in the real world, right? Yeah. But this is another avenue of surveillance. And if people, are looking at, and I'm looking at player behavior in this too and trying to extrapolate from it. So like, it's a thing people are doing. But there was another, there's a lot of leaks in this because it's something that people that work for these companies, are often concerned about, where like police have subpoenaed Blizzard for information about people. And you could argue that it's for the best, if somebody is a murder suspect or something like that, but it's the same argument, right? About safety and privacy.
Yeah. But you could also say like, oh, this person kills a bunch of people in this game because it's a game.
Sure. Oh, well, and of course, there's a
fake case.
There's a long history in this country of blaming violent video games. They do know that.
Watch out.
They do. Yeah. I run. Oh God. But there's a long history of blaming video games for people's behavior in real life, which is of course, it's both absurd and a more complicated conversation, right? Because like there are forms of violence, there's misogyny and racism, not just in people's behavior, but in the content of games. And obviously games are products of culture and they feed back into culture. And so it's a conversation that is certainly worth having, right? We need to engage critically with all media, whether it's a video game or not. But the saying that like playing Grand Theft Auto or infesting people in Orgrimmar with a zombie plague means anything about your morality or your capacity for violence in real life is completely absurd.
Yeah, the hypodermic model where it's just like, oh no, you played WoW, it injected you with the bad thoughts because of it. The fact that it lets you do these things is such an oversimplification. Yes.
And that's such a Satan thing.
It's very much like the Satanic Panic.
It sounds
it is. And there's also games like League of Legends. I don't know if you've played. It's not an MMO, but it's an online multiplayer game, and they had it may still have a player behavior department that was run for a while by a psychologist who would do like certain experiments like priming and A/B testing and stuff like that to try and curtail toxic behavior in the community. But it kind of, in my eyes at least, so this was always sort of met kind of uncritically by games media and academia, because he was, they were trying to do good, because League of Legends is a famously toxic community.
Yeah.
But they would do things like, for a while, if you were banned for having an offensive name, in order to reactivate and play again, you had to complete a portion of the narcissistic personality inventory for adolescents, which is like a psychological screening tool for medical settings.
Yeah.
And you had to do this. And to this day, I've been unable to determine, and they won't tell me, what, if anything, was done with this information.
Right?
Like, that sounds like the FBI. Like, that sounds like some kind of shadowy cabal that are in the Pentagon.
It's such an invasive.
Right?
There's so many less invasive ways they could have attempted to solve that problem.
It also forefronts the DSM, and it's at that time, at any particular time, what it says is correct or normal or indicators of badness, and imposes it.
It also
100%
feels like
in your play space.
It also feels like that is what it will. That will lead to I guess I'll say, less than sincere filling out of that criteria.
Because it's a condition of getting your toy back. 100%.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. And, they also, so they use this stuff also to try and govern algorithmically, right? Because they don't want to pay people to observe all the time, which makes sense. I understand.
Yeah.
But then, the problem is that how do you code normative behavior and deviant behavior? And how do you discern between playful behavior and behavior that's that you want to pathologize for some reason?
And when are they putting that into the robots that are on San Francisco streets right now
100%
to make sure that people don't sleep in the rich courtyards of malls? That's all they do, is make sure that people don't sleep there or live there because they have been forced out of other places to live and be. When will that be in there, and is it already there?
I'm sure it already is in a lot of cases, because you can also get, well, I don't want to speculate, but I can't speculate about League of Legends, for example, but there are studies being done with funding from different sources with different goals that want access to player data for different things, and I'm of the mind that the less transparent this is, the more suspicious we should be of it, especially since this is a for-profit company and they can say a lot of things about wanting to improve the tenor of online discourse. Well, that's fine, but I kind of have yet to see a profitable company do that in a way that isn't profit first and that doesn't somehow still manage to let the most egregious behavior go unchecked forever.
Yeah,
so
that feels like we want to do psychological research to improve the stickiness of our game, but realize we have to say, oh, it's about fighting harassment.
Yeah. And even if their motivations are 100% sincere, and it's a team, right, of people, we can't,
I'm sure
but but the practice isn't as I just described one little thing of a lot of stuff that's been done. You can tell that the practice maybe doesn't bear out the most ethical results and kind of fails your mission. So
yeah.
It's a drag.
Oh my God.
But it's interesting.
Fascinating.
Utterly fascinating. Dear friends, we have 5 minutes left in this
I'm
show.
so sorry. God, I talked so much.
Don't apologize
We
for
invited
anything.
you
This has
on
been
this show to
fascinating.
talk to us.
Yeah, this has been so good.
I've been alone for so long. It's nice to talk about.
This is so interesting. No,
This is absolutely fascinating.
I'll be right back while you do this, because I have to show why I'm so interested in this. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
I have no idea what he's getting. What I wanted to say is in 5 minutes, you all have to head to the Discord for the pre-show. But with these last 5 minutes, Horde Jedi,
yes,
I have a question for you. My question for you is, what do you want your what questions do you want your final paper to answer? Right now, you're going to turn in your thesis. What questions you wanted to answer, and what change or in discussion, in research, in game development would you want to see? And this, of course, based on your research, could be completely wrong, or it could be completely like, oh, that was not the question to look at, but tell me.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. And they're questions I imagine will evolve over time. But I think right now it's like, I just want to know, in part, there's a personal motivation because like, I want to know when I'm engaging with these games, how they work, how I'm being watched, and to what end. I want to know, I'd like to imagine a world in which we can come up with solutions to create, because obviously these are toxic spaces. Obviously playing a video game with the people can suck. And you want somebody to come in and intervene and help. I don't know that I can develop any great systems, but I do think that like the way that happens is by constantly critiquing and interrogating the systems that we have and being transparent about it. And right now these systems, like real world systems, function on no transparency. And that is something that definitely needs to change, I think.
Well, and it's so in the developer's interest to not examine the degree to which those kinds of systems are working that I think it's critical. I agree with you completely on how important it is that we call out those things.
Thanks, guys.
What I grabbed is, it's been 10 years since I graduated college and I still have my game design reader. Wow. So this conversation is right up my alley because I was a film major and I kept this.
I would love to know within that. That's so cool. And if anybody watching or Forrest or Emily Pineapple is interested, I can recommend books and articles that I think are really great. And the nice thing about games literature is it's largely really like chill and accessible and is motivated. Like it's written to help an industry, you know what I mean? And it's great. It's fun. So I can offer anybody.
Love those recommendations.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yes.
Absolutely. Horde Jedi, thank you so much
for having me. I appreciate it. You guys are the best.
Thank you for sharing about your research, about all of these fascinating things that I feel like are just gonna like live in my head for a little while, and like my brain is gonna crunch on them, in that really fantastic way. Horde Jedi, where can people find you? Because you are also an incredible artist.
You're so
do you
sweet.
have any of the art to pop up real quick, or did I just like, you're just like,
No, it's okay.
I'll have to pull it up.
It's okay. It's okay.
But where can they find your art?
I mean, most of what I haven't, I do fabric stuff. I sew, make clothes and costumes like that. That is kind of offline at the moment, but I do post pictures of them on my Instagram at cloudclipperco. But if you, you can follow me on Twitter at feral_yeet. It's a very embarrassing name. It started as a burner account and now it's real. And if anybody wants to, thank you, if anybody wants to ever talk about video games or weird stuff or anything you want, feel free to. I like all y'all.
Oh my goodness! Thank you so much, Horde Jedi. Absolute delight. Oh my God. I'm so excited to think about these things. Friends, it is 6:00, which means you got to head over to the Discord for the pre-show. And then you got to head over to Twitch to watch Planet Scum live. And then after that, you'll head on back to the Discord for the post-show. Friends, I love you all. Enjoy your shows. Thank you so much, Horde Jedi. And good night and good climb.
Good night and good climb.